What's up YouTube? Welcome back to part 2 of Build Your PC episode, and let's start building our PC. We have all the parts here. Let's begin. So guys, before we start our video, I just want to give a quick shout out to Acro Engineering for helping us to have all these parts that you see here on the table, sparing the graphic card. I approached them because I wanted to build this PC, and they were very kind enough to help me out with this. This is a very special build for a very special person. So they actually came out and helped me out with a lot of stuff. So thank you guys, thank you so much, and I really mean it from the bottom of my heart. Thank you so much, and I hope that our cooperation will only grow in near future. So now coming back to the build, the parts that we are going to use in this build, they are for the CPU. We are going to use the AMD Ryzen 5 3600X processor, which is a 6-core 12-thread processor. Amazing processor, amazing value for money. For the motherboard, we are going to go ahead with the MSI B550 Tomahawk motherboard. I really love MSI's Tomahawk series of motherboard, and I'm so happy that I could get this, especially because it has the PCI Gen 4 support both for the M.2 NVMe SSD as well as for the graphic card. So it's amazing. For the graphic card, we are going ahead with the Radeon 5700 XT. It's the 50th anniversary celebration edition, and I'm really happy that I could use this card for this build. For the RAM, we are going ahead with the G-Skill RAM. I wanted to go and get myself a kit, a 16 GB kit, but I couldn't get that, or I couldn't have that, unfortunately. So I went ahead and got two 8 GB sticks for myself. These are the 3200 megahertz sticks, and they have the cache latency of CL16, so that's going to be pretty okay, pretty awesome. For the storage, we're going to have two storage. We're going to use one storage, which is the M.2 NVMe from XPG. It's a 250 GB drive wherein we are going to install our Windows, and it's basically going to be a boot drive, and then I'm going to pair it up with a 1 terabyte or a 2 terabyte normal HDD, which is the Seagate Barracuda. It's lying somewhere here. I need to find out where exactly it is. For the power supply, we are going ahead with the NZXT C750, which is a 750 watt power supply, 80 plus gold certified. Amazing power supply, so we're going to use this. For the case, now I had a lot of options, but in the end I decided to go ahead with the Macube550 from Gamerstorm, which is under the Deep Cool brand. So we're going to go ahead with that case, but however the case has been a little bit modified ever since we got that case. So this video actually is about a week late because we wanted to get a little bit of modification. So yeah, these are the parts that we are going to use in this build, and without wasting any time, let's begin building the PC. Oh, it's gonna be exciting. So guys, for building the PC, let's just go ahead and first open up our motherboard, and after you take out your motherboard, place it on top of this box here. Alright, so once you put your motherboard on top of the box, the first thing you're going to do is you're going to check for a triangle mark on the CPU socket, which is here. Now make sure that you don't put your fingers on top of the socket. This is where your CPU is going to go. So once you have located the triangle mark on your socket, which in my case in this motherboard is here. Now if you're using an AMD board or an AMD chipset, the triangle mark usually is going to be on the left top corner of the socket. In case of Intel, it's going to be on the left bottom side. So this is what it is. So before you start taking out your CPU, before you take your CPU out of the box, you need to go and check where exactly is the triangle mark. So you'll be able to see a triangle mark here. Now I'll tell you in a moment why this is important. Now the next thing you're going to do is basically go and take your CPU out of the box. So once you have your CPU out of the box, what we are going to do is we are going to open up this latch here. I'm going to press it, and I'm going to pull this up. So this latch opens, and when this latch opens, it actually unlocks this socket here. Now what we are going to do is we are going to take out our CPU, and remember to hold the CPU from the top, bottom two side as I am holding right now. Now when you are taking the CPU out, you need to make sure that you also find a marking of a triangle on your CPU. Now here, if you see, the triangle mark is actually on, again, the bottom left corner of the CPU. Now you have to mark this triangle along with the triangle mark on your socket, which is here. So now what we are going to do is we are going to take the CPU and we are going to align both these triangles, and we are going to carefully place our CPU on the socket. Now when you place your CPU on the socket, it is just going to sit firmly and it's not going to move around. As you can see, I can't move this CPU anywhere. Now the pins are inside the socket, and you have to be very gentle with this. Once your CPU is in, the next thing you want to do is go and lock this latch again back into place, and that way the CPU just can't come out. Now it's locked into position. Now the next thing that we are going to install on this is basically our CPU air cooler. Alright guys, so as you can see, we have actually removed the retention brackets that were pre-installed onto the motherboard. We don't need it in our case. In some cases, having these retention brackets can be useful, or they can be used, but again it would depend upon the kind of cooling solution that you're going to install on top of your CPU. So that would completely depend upon what kind of cooler you are using. So I suggest that you please go and read the instruction manual as to how to mount your cooler on top of your CPU. Now before you mount the cooler, you will also need to go and check if there is any kind of thermal paste that has been pre-applied to your cooler or to the base plate of your cooler, which is going to make contact with your CPU. In case there is no pre-applied thermal paste, you'll have to go and apply the thermal paste. Now in my case, I have taken out the pre-applied thermal paste here. As you can see, there's no thermal paste here. So what I'm going to go and do here again is I'm going to go and apply some thermal paste on my CPU, and you don't need to apply a lot of it, just a little bit should be more than enough. So this is more than enough, and I usually like to spread my thermal paste because that gives a better spread, and I'm absolutely sure that my thermal paste is covering the entire IHS of my CPU. So now that we have applied our thermal paste, we can now go ahead and mount our CPU cooler. So the way you have to mount your CPU cooler is basically easy. Just put the cooler, align the bolts here with the socket down below, place it on top of this and tighten it. So I'm just going to tighten all the screws and I'll catch you in a minute. Alright, so now that we have already installed our CPU cooler onto the top of our CPU, the next thing we are going to do is we are going to go and connect this fan here to our motherboard. And for doing that, we are going to take this wire here which comes out of the CPU fan, and we are going to go and connect it to a header on the top here, which is called the CPU fan. You can see that very easily on most of the motherboards. You will have this thing on to the top of your motherboard, top right next to the VRM, which is this thing right here next to it. So what you've got to do is, it's pretty simple. Just take this wire and plug it onto these 4 pins. The next step is basically go and install our RAM. So as you can see here, there are 4 ports, 1, 2, 3, 4. So these are the 4 ports where your RAM sticks are going to be installed. Now there are these 4 ports. So usually what the order in which you are supposed to install your RAM is basically the second port is number 1, the fourth is number 2, the first one is number 3, and the fourth and the third one actually is number 4. So basically, if you are still confused with what I said, you can actually go and refer to your motherboard manual. So what we are going to do is, I'm going to press this lock here and it unlocks. That's it. It's so easy, guys. And now I'm going to take out my RAM sticks and I'm going to go and install it onto my motherboard. So installing a RAM stick again is pretty easy. So as you can see here, there is this cut here. Now there is this cut on, or there is this socket here on your motherboard, if you see here on the RAM slot. Now what you've got to do is, you basically have to go and align with this lock here, or with this point here, and slide your RAM sticks down. So what we've got to do is, we are just going to go and slide the RAM inside and just press it with both the hands until you hear a click. So once you hear the click, that means your RAM stick has been installed properly. So I'll just quickly go and install our second RAM also. So now we have installed our CPU, we have installed our CPU fan, we have installed our RAM. So the next thing that I want to install here is basically my M.2 drive. Now M.2 drive, there are two sockets on my motherboard, as you can see here. One is this, the other one is this. Now this is for Gen 4, or which is I mean, most of the drives which you find in the market, which are pretty cheap, are basically Gen 3. We need Gen 4. Now Gen 4 I currently don't have, but still I think I'm going to go and use this slot to install my Gen 3 drive. So it's absolutely fine installing a Gen 3 drive onto your Gen 4 socket. It's gonna work fine, but the only thing is, you're not going to get those blazing fast speeds. So yeah, it should be absolutely fine. So we're just gonna go and unmount these two screws here, take out the socket, and then as you can see, now we have this slot open. This is where we are going to connect our M.2 drive. Once I have my M.2 drive, as you can see, this is from XPG. This is a 256 GB drive. So what I'm going to go here do here is, basically I'm going to go and slide this drive inside the socket here. Now there's just one way that this drive can go. Again, as you can see here, this has this marking or this cut here, and this has to correspond to the cut on the slot here, just like that, and you have your M.2 drive installed. Now what I'm going to do here is, I'm going to go again and install the cover that was initially there. On top of this, there is this protective layer on the heat shield. Remove that, expose the heat pad, and go ahead and install it on top of the heat spreader. So guys, as you can see, we have already installed our M.2 drive. So in case if you guys are not using a M.2 drive, you can actually skip to the next step that we are going to do very soon. But more or less, whatever components we wanted to install onto our motherboard before we put this stuff inside our computer case has already been done. So we have already installed our RAM, we have installed our cooler, we have installed the CPU, and we have installed our M.2 drive. Now this thing which I want to tell you here quickly is that when you are tightening this air cooler, when you are tightening it, don't over tighten it, otherwise you are going to break this socket. So tight it to the extent that it is tight, but don't over tighten it. Don't try to exert a lot of force or pressure for tightening the screws or tightening this whole cooler into the socket. Be very gentle. This is pretty delicate stuff, so you need to be careful about that. So guys, yes, without any delay, let's move on to our next step, which is getting our computer case open and fitting this thing inside our case. So let's go to our next step. So guys, the next thing that we are going to do here is, basically we are going to align these standoffs that you can see here inside the case along with the holes that are there on the motherboard itself. Now we are going to position this motherboard in a way that all these standoffs inside the case here align with the holes on your motherboard, and then you are going to tighten up, and you're going to tighten this with the screws that come with your computer case. So as you can see here, I have this small bag of screws which came along with my case that I had purchased. So I'm going to use these screws to go and tighten up my motherboard inside our case, and I'm just going to be back in a second. So guys, as you can see, now we have already mounted our motherboard inside our system. The next thing what we are going to do is we are going to go and mount our graphic card. So there are these screws here on the side panel here which you will be able to see. So what you are going to do is you are going to remove two of them because I am going to install it on the first slot here, which is actually next to the second and the third protective shield here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go and unscrew them, and then I'm going to go and install my graphic card. So let's just quickly unscrew them. Alright guys, so as you can see, I have removed these two covers here, and what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go and put my graphic card onto the first slot here. So for that, there's a lock here. You want to press it towards the back, you just push it and take your graphic card with these two slots facing up, the power connectors facing up. Go and insert the card into the slot and push it until you hear a click sound. That's it. So now we have already mounted our graphic card, and the screws that you had removed while you were taking the protective cover from here, you want to go back and screw it. So guys, now that we have fixed most of the thing inside our computer, the next thing that we are going to go and do is basically fit our case fans. Now case fans are extremely important for the fact because they are the ones which are going to pull cold air inside our system or pull fresh air inside our system. And then the fan that you see here, the rear fan, that's going to exhaust all the hot air. So let's just go and see how we are going to fix or fit the fans inside our case. So if we just quickly see here, I've got a few options. So 1, 2 and 3. I can actually fix 3 fans inside this on the front, or I can fit 3 fans on the side. So I think it would be a better idea to fit 3 fans on the front so that it can actually pull air directly to the graphic card or to the CPU cooler right here. So in my opinion, I think that's what I'm going to do here, and let's start fitting some fans. And once we have fixed the fans onto the chassis, then I'll tell you guys how to go and connect it to the motherboard. So guys, as you can see, we have already fixed our fans. Now the fans that we are using is actually LED version of the Thermaltake fans. We are using Thermaltake ring trio fans. They are very nice fans. They have extremely good LEDs. They glow up. When they glow up, they look pretty good. And thankfully we have a fan hub that comes. So basically we are going to connect this to a fan hub, and then we are going to connect our fan hub to the motherboard using a USB 2.0 header, which we will see in some time from now. So basically we are not going to use any system fan headers on our motherboard. So in case if you guys are using fans which do not use any kind of fan hub, then in that case you would want to go and connect it to the system fan header on your motherboard, and that is all you will have to do. So again, just like we attach the CPU fan to the motherboard, it will be exactly the same way. That will be connected. So it again has a lock which just slides into the 4-pin header, or if it's a 3-pin fan, so you can still go and install it onto your 4-pin header. So it's pretty easy, nothing complicated. So once you do it, you'll know for yourself how easy it is. Now what we are going to do is we are going to connect the various front panel connectors. We have some USB ports on our front panel here, so we are going to connect those USB ports on the case to the motherboard. So it's pretty simple. Let's quickly see how we do that. So guys, now let's just connect the front panel connector. First let's just connect the switch which will enable us to switch on and switch off our computer. Now for that there would be a wire which will have a lot of small plugs, something like this. In this you can actually clearly see it's written power SW, power LED plus, power LED minus, and then here we have reset switch. In some of the cases you may also have hard drive HDD LED plus and minus. So they are all very easy to connect, nothing to panic about. So on your motherboard towards the right bottom corner there'll be a few pins which will be labeled JFP1. So what you are going to go and do is towards the top there would be 9 pins on that. The top right 2 pins are basically for the power switch. So what we are going to do is we are just going to go and quickly plug our power switch onto the right 2 top pins, and then we are going to go and connect our power LED. So the power LED button is pretty easy to connect. So what we have to do is the power LED plus comes to the first button on the top, and the minus button comes next to it. So once we have plugged it, we have the power LED which has been plugged, which is now correctly plugged onto your motherboard. The next would be the reset switch. Now reset switch is on the second row from the right, the third and the fourth button. The fifth button on all the motherboards are actually free. They don't connect to any of the jacks, so don't connect anything to that. So once you have connected this, your power button switch using which you are going to restart or you are going to start your computer is already connected. So the next cable that we are going to connect is basically the USB 3. So it's very easy to actually get to know which is USB 3. It would be something like this, a blue color cable, pretty thick and not very easy to kind of bend. So this is for the one which you are going to go and connect to your USB 3.0 header on your motherboard. So the USB header on your motherboard is going to be basically a black color, very wide socket, which again would be down here. On my motherboard it's right here, which says JUSB 3. So just find out a socket on your motherboard which says JUSB 3 and go and connect this connector to it. Now again it's very easy to connect. This pin would go just one way. If you see, there's this small notch here on the top of the connector, and you've got to keep this notch towards the top side when you are connecting any pin, or when you are connecting it to its USB 3.0 header onto the motherboard. So it's pretty simple. Keep it towards the top, align it with the socket and just give it a gentle push, and that's it. It's connected. The next cable that you would want to connect to your motherboard is basically the one which says HD audio. Now the HD audio cable you can actually connect or you might not connect. That's completely dependent on you. So if you want to connect this to your HD audio header, the one header which says JAUD, which is towards the bottom left, in 90% or 99% of the motherboards that I've worked with, it has been always towards the bottom left corner. The last header, which looks like a USB port, not exactly a USB port but a USB connector of the motherboard, or it's going to be a 9-pin, and you can just go and connect this directly onto it. So there's no kind of complication in this. We'll just go and connect it. So guys, the next thing what we are going to do here is basically prepare our power supply unit so that we can install it inside our system. So guys, based on various components that you are going to use inside your system, you would need different cables for that. So in our case, the cables that we are going to need right out of the box would be a 24-pin power connector, which would connect to this jack here on one side, and on the other side that would connect to the motherboard's 24-pin. We would also need an 8-pin CPU connector. So here we have the CPU connector. I'm sorry, this is the CPU connector, and it is labeled CPU, as you can see. So there is no way that you are going to make any kind of mistakes while you are connecting this to your computer. So here it's clearly mentioned it's CPU, so we're gonna take that CPU cable and we're going to connect it to our motherboard. The next thing we are going to need is basically a PCIe cable that is going to connect to our graphics card. So as you can see, we have three PCIe cable slots here, and we're going to connect wires to one of them and then connect it to our graphic card. Now these are the peripherals and SATA. So if you have a SATA drive which requires extra connectivity or which requires external power, you're going to connect the power cable here and then you're going to connect the other side to your SATA drive. Because I'm going to use one SATA drive and I'm also going to use a fan hub which unfortunately uses a Molex cable. Now a Molex cable is the one which is a thicker cable, you'll see it in a while from now. And we would need that cable also so that we can connect our fan hub. So basically these are the cables that we are going to require while we are building this PC. Now in your case it could be completely different, but basically these are the cables that would run out of your power supply and go to your various components inside your computer. So guys, after we have installed all the cables behind the PSU and we have prepared the PSU, the next thing we are going to do is basically install the PSU inside the case. So guys, to install the power supply unit, what we have to do basically is take the back side of the power supply where you have the switch, and from the inside just push it towards outside. I did some cable management I think at the wrong time. Alright, so it's pretty simple. Once the power supply is in, we want to push it to its place, and we're going to go and screw it up and make sure that it doesn't move around. Alright, so now that the power supply is in place, the next thing we are going to do is basically go and connect all our wires to the motherboard. So let's start guys. Alright guys, so now that we have most of the cables coming out from where we want, the first thing I'm going to do is I am going to go and plug in my 24-pin connector onto my system. Now this lock here, if you can see, this lock here is going to come to the outside or to the outer side of the case. So I want to go and plug this in. Alright, once I hear the click sound, it means the cable has been plugged in properly, and I am going to push it a little bit towards the outside so that this is nice and clean. So guys, the next thing that we are going to connect is basically the graphic card here. For graphic card, the PCIe connector that you had connected, this is what you're going to require. So what we're going to do is we just going to connect it. It's going to be pretty easy. These wires are going to go just one way, and you can't just mess them up. So it's going to be pretty easy, and the left out wire you can just put it inside it and pull the wire, excess wire from behind, and you can just put it inside your shroud. So guys, as you can see, I have connected the CPU power connector here. We have the 24 pin right here. So these are the two main cables that are going to be connected to your motherboard. We have the CPU fan header here connected to the CPU fan header. And if you see other ports like system fan SYS fan 1, which means system fan 1, you have system fan 2. These are basically all the headers to which you can actually connect your aftermarket fans. We also now have the graphic card cables that have been connected, so our graphic card should also be functional. So more or less all the cables have been connected. Now the only thing that I have not connected as of now is basically a hard drive. It's your SATA drive. Now to connect a SATA drive, it's pretty simple. Alright, so if you see the ports right here, they have a flat head. Now these are the ones which are actually going to be connected to your hard drive. You'll have a SATA cable and you're going to go and connect your SATA cable to these ports right here. Now I think I'll have to do a follow-up video because unfortunately my drive fell and it has some problems now. I don't think it's going to work in any way because it got dismantled. So there is a big issue with the drive now. I'm gonna get a new drive, and when I've kind of attach it to my computer, you guys can actually see that. So basically, as of now, I'm not gonna connect any drive. I just have one NVMe M.2 drive. That should be good enough for me to actually let my system work. So these are the cables, guys, that we had attached. So now whatever is left to do is basically do all the cable management. So guys, as you can see, now I've cable managed everything. It's nice and clean. The wires are all not scattered. It's pretty neat and clean. So yep, basically this is what it is. That's what you have to do on the back side of your case. And yeah, front side we actually don't have a lot of cables to worry, so there's nothing much that we should be doing there. So guys, basically as you can see, we finally have the build complete and everything looks just amazing. It's pretty neat, pretty clean, well organized. And the only thing that's missing out from the system as of now is a larger capacity storage drive, which I wanted it to be a hard drive, and unfortunately the drive fell off from the table and it got damaged. So I mean, I'll have to wait for a replacement drive, and probably I might do a kind of follow-up video, or maybe make it a part of video part number 3, wherein I'll just show you how to attach a SATA drive to this particular system, or to your system for that instance. So guys, I hope you really like the build, you enjoyed the build, and whatever reservations that you have had in the past regarding building your own PC, it's all gone. It's very simple. I think I took about 2 hours to film this whole thing, and yeah, I mean, it was pretty simple, it was pretty straightforward, one of the kind of fastest builds that I've done. So there's nothing much to say. I hope you enjoyed the build, I hope you enjoyed the tutorial. So if you like the video, press that like button and share it with your friends. If you have not already subscribed to our channel, go and subscribe to our channel, it means us a lot. And until part 3, it's Sajeev signing off. See you soon with part 3 of this whole build series, which is going to be the final video. And yep, until next time, stay happy, stay healthy, stay blessed. Bye bye.